Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to get through this thing called strife. Eclectic word, strife, it means something stressful, something kind of ouchy, something that hurts. But I'm here to tell you, there is something else. Paratopia. A world of never-frowning smiley faces. You commune with the sun, even in darkest night. So when the private digs come looking for you, you know the ones hired by your parents to deprogram you, right? You tell them, do not think. You tell them, you're already home. And if the man remains on your case, punch him in the face. Might as well, he already thinks you're crazy.
I tend to think this is going to be a thing where people just talk about this in general conversation, and it becomes something that, well, I listen to Paratopia, or I listen to Eerie Radio, or whatever. They begin talking about it, and eventually this becomes something everybody just knows and talks about.
Right. Yeah.
And the fact that, Charlene has seen a flying saucer doesn't really mean that much anymore, because so is Bob and so is Jill.
Right.
So now they're more comfortable to talk about something like that. So,
it's acceptance versus disclosure. I mean, which do you think is more important for a healthy society? To have something from on high come down and command it at you? Aliens exist. We've known about them all along.
Right.
And now let's give us money for war or peace or whatever. Let's make it a political function of our society. Oh, fuck you.
And not only that, but we've lied about it to you for
we've lied to you for the last 85,000 years, but now you finally get to know and don't throw us in jail. No.
Right.
I think it just makes more sense to have sort of a groundswell of acceptance and not an elitist disclosure. There's my catchphrase for the next X conference.
There's a girl at work that I talk to a lot, and she is an atheist. And I guess more or less that's how I count myself, but I can't count myself as an atheist because I do believe there's something. But I said, so when we die, what do you think happens? And she said, well, what do you think happens? I said, well, just from my life experiences, I can say there is something. That I know for absolute certain. I feel like I know that, that there is no, this is not an end. I will not end when I take my last breath. There is more. And she says, see, I don't believe that. I think that we're done. When we're dead, we're done. That's it. And I can't accept that as anything. I can't accept that. Not based on seeing things that are there one second and not there the next, but it is an absolute real experience. Seeing things beside the bed, seeing things in the sky, hearing children laugh in the bottom of a Gettysburg home. I mean, come on, you just can't. I mean, what is all that if there is nothing else? What is all of that? You're going to tell me that's nothing? That's just my head? That's just our minds?
Teaching Jeffrey J. Kripal how to speak fucking English is filmed before a live studio audience. Jeremy.
Oh, hey, Jeff Kripal. How you doing? Windy day out, eh?
Yeah, it's a windy one.
What can I do you for, bud?
Well, I came up with some new terminology for the paranormal fields. And since you're my teacher, I thought I could run them by you.
Again. Well, you're not getting any extra credit for this, so, whatever. What you got?
The first one I've come up with is the supernatural.
You mean the supernatural?
No, the supernatural.
Right, the supernatural.
Yeah, no, I heard you. Supernatural. No, 2 words. Supernatural.
So you're saying 2 words. We've got a word for supernatural. It's supernatural.
I don't think you're getting it. I've got another one. Let me try this on you. When I listen to experiencers such as yourself, I try to think with them.
You try to do what?
I try to think with them. You try to think with them. Think with. Think with. Think with. Think with. That's right. Think with. It's like how you're saying it, but it's one word. There's a hyphen. Huh. So supernatural's 2 words. Think with is 1 word. These are your new terms. This is what you've come up. This is... They pay you the big bucks for this at Rice? I was thinking for my next book, I would unleash my next term. Paranormal. 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 So it's like paranormal. It's like paranormal, but it's a whole other word. There's a cedille in everything. Paranormal. Jeff, come on, man. You're better than this. You know what? I'm your teacher. I'm going to grade you on a curve. That's a C. They're all C's, all right? Not even C minuses. They're straight C's. So, good job, buddy. Now, Scoot, I've got nothing better to do here. Just go. Thanks. We'll talk later. Flip. Yeah, I know flip. A clip. Flip, you didn't change the sound or the writing or the meaning of it or anything. It's just flip. Like people flip, you know, they change their minds. They flip. They flip-flop. Flip. Stop saying flip! Really, it's the flip. Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. Well. We find ourselves at another brand new, exciting Paratopia Spooktakular. We've got 2 guests who I am certain Jeff would have loved to have interviewed. Mike Fiorito. He is the author of For All We Know. He is a freelance journalist, an award-winning writer, and I think a teacher, At least he used to be, but I think he is. Maybe I shouldn't put that in this. Maybe I should ask him. Maybe I should do my due diligence. But you know what? It's Halloween. I'm full of candy and vigor. Not so much the studying and the fact-checking. I consider Mike's book, For All We Know, which is mainly what we're going to be talking about, sort of a gateway drug to Jeff Kripal-type thinking, or Kripalian, if I may, making him sound like some species from somewhere. Kripalian thinking. And then we have another guest, Allison Jornlin, who I don't know if she's political at all. I don't know if she's a Harris Walls kind of gal or who she might be voting for. But she should be, because she certainly brings the joyful warrior spirit to the show, as you will hear. She is, let me just read her brief bio here, recipient of the Milwaukee Paranormal Conference's 2016 Wisconsin Researcher of the Year Award. She's been investigating strange phenomena for more than 20 years. Blah, blah, blah. Bunch of stuff. Anyway, Allison runs ParanormalWomen.com and currently works as a professional weirdo, speaking throughout the U.S., writing for a variety of publications, and developing haunted history tours for American Ghost Walks. We will be talking about all of that, believe it or not, and much, much more, including some Hawaii lore and historical figureage, to make up a word. But before we get to them, a couple of points of business. One, well, I should say, my microphone, for some reason, in these interviews, I don't know if it was the StreamYard program I was working, had a bug in it or something, but it sounds okay for her. I mean, it sounds pretty good for her interview, but for Mike's interview, my microphone, I don't know what's going on. It sounds like I'm underwater, and like any little noise I make is like blaring in the foreground, which I edited around as much as possible. Mike sounds fine, and that's great because he does most of the talking, which is also great. So I'm going to let it fly, but just know that I know. You know that I know. This is where my perfectionism lies. I don't like it when I sound bad. I just don't fact-check guests' resumes, I guess. If only Jeff were here to add something pivy and insulting to me. Speaking not of which, really, so here's the other bit of business, and I had mentioned this on Where Did the Road Go with Soraya Asgath. I have an episode of Paratopia, an unreleased episode called Paratopia Zero Parapurge,
And it is something that Jeff and I whipped up as a response to David Biedney going on a show and trashing us. And this was around the time of, that. If anyone remembers all of that. And everyone wanted to know, why did he do that? What was the friendship breakup about? And we decided to take the high ground publicly, while privately wallowing in our anger. And so we never addressed it. Except we did. We did this episode. And the reason we never released it was, I think, mainly because, if I remember correctly, Biedney, to our minds, now we didn't know this for a fact. It was something that we had actually spoken to Gene Steinberg about, I believe, even though we weren't big fans of his by that point, I don't think. But certain things transcend personal relationships. And one was, it seemed as though Dave was like spiraling and maybe suicidal, the way that he was acting on his Paracast message board and during shows. And he was just like inappropriate and weird. And so we didn't want to poke that bear if he was lashing out at us in a depression or something. And on top of that, many of our listeners were telling us, hey, don't answer any of that stuff. This isn't about that. Your show isn't about that. It's about, discussing the paranormal, and let's not get into personalities. Who cares? Although we had just as many people who were like, I want to know, popcorn ready, nom, nom, nom. So, we took the high ground, and I shelved this. And then when we started selling Paratopia as an archive, I said, hey, Jeff, why don't we put it in that? And he said, nah, let's just let sleeping dogs lie. And, of course, as you know, Jeff Ritzmann has passed away. His wife, Lisa, has passed away. And unbeknownst to me, until somebody told me this while I was live streaming on YouTube, Dave Biedney in January, I believe, passed away. So it's interesting because it must have been prior to that or something. I mean, I didn't see it. I had Google searched him relatively recently because I was thinking about releasing this, and I wanted to see, like, what's Biedney up to? And it looked like his life was really good. Like, it looked like he was teaching at Yale again. I mean, this is just from my Google search. So I thought, like, okay, I won't release it because, why stir up all that for him just because I'm a completionist? Like, if I were a listener, I would want one more chance to hear Jeff's voice. I would want the conclusion to that story or the other side. And I don't know. It's just like, how do you keep an episode of Paratopia on the shelf forever? So that's me. I mean, I'm the guy who, like, when your favorite singer dies, you want to hear the unreleased tracks, even though the singer didn't release them when he was alive. So that's me. But I was willing to not do it because I thought, well, Biedney's life looks pretty good. He's definitely out of ufology. He hasn't said peep from what I can tell. And so let him go live his life and not make his life miserable with this. Which it may not, because who cares at this point? This is like a decade later, right? But just in cases. So I sat on it and then found out he has also passed away. And so now I think I am going to release it because he's already said his side. He doesn't need to rebut it. I don't think there's anything in here that requires a rebuttal. If you listen to it, you'll understand why. This isn't just like some weird, I don't know, bunch of accusations that you're going to think, that's not possible. No, I think if you know David Biedney or knew David Biedney, you'd be like, yeah, that happened. All of that said, I don't want it to be the last thing that you hear and remember of Paratopia, of Jeff's voice, of us together. So I think I will put it after the season finale of Paratopia, but before we go into the episodes of the short-lived Paratopia Oculus show. So look forward to all of that. I'm telling you all of this now because there aren't enough episodes of Paratopia left that I'm going to make it to another brand new Halloween special. Although I may do a big send-off episode. So you know what? I will do that. I will do one more brand new episode after the finale of Paratopia. So it'll go Paratopia finale, Paratopia 0, and then one more live goodbye from me, or brand new goodbye, not live, but brand new goodbye from me. And then we'll go into Paratopia Oculus, and then the few episodes I have left of Jeff's solo show, Paranormal Waypoint. So that's what's coming up, and then this is over, and then Our Undoing Radio continues on. If you haven't been listening to that, oh my God, you're missing something special. I'm having this season a season-long, long-form discussion with philosopher, scientist, and now psychonaut Tom Cheatham. What happens when scholar meets experiencer, and has a very long series of talks. I hope you tune in. We talk about everything from Henry Corbin to Sufism to the Imaginal to Carl Jung to Iboga to, go down the list of stuff. And of course, my 2 cents worth from the non-duality and paranormal and so-called alien abduction perspectives. It is something special, so that's every Wednesday for as long as we go. I'm keeping this in. Usually I do like a 10-episode season, but this is going longer, and we both love talking to each other, so it may just go on forever. Season 11 may just go on forever. I don't know. Anyway, go listen to that if you haven't given it a shot. All right. Up next, Paratopia. I have a very special guest. Oh, that's right. Someone I've never spoken with before. So this is going to be a first. This is going to be great. He is the author of For All We Know. His name is Mike Fiorito. Mike, welcome to the program, and then I have some news for you. Go ahead.
Well, great. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it. I've been listening to your podcast, and it's a good combination of great information, and you guys have a sense of humor. So I'm really glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here, and I was super psyched because never do I, with the exception of maybe like interviewing trickster theorist George Hansen, maybe another person, but really maybe Graham Hancock. I did this too. I don't really write down questions, but as I was going through your book, I had some. I was like, oh, this is good, and now they're missing.
Oh gosh!
So I have no questions for you. So we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way and wing it. But I have.
That's great because then I'll be able to answer them.
Oh, good, excellent. So we're both coming into this blind. So this is a novel. It is a very tidy, short novel. It's sort of a slice of life vignette style, Raymond Carver-esque to my mind, because you're a really good writer, which I am only surprised by, in that this is, yes, it's a novel, but it's a UFO book. And so when I'm not used to good writing in the UFO world. So you're actually a really good writer, and you're like, it's a short book, but it feels economical. Like it feels like every word counts. And that's what I like about it. Let's, I guess, sort of get into why you wrote this, and like the format of it is different than you might expect. Like it's not just sort of a straightforward novel. Each chapter has a point about the UFO, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit, why you wrote this and
Sure.
what it is you're doing with the book.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for those comments. I am a writer. I'm a journalist. I've written a few books. I'm also a teacher of English composition. I teach at City University of New York. So the goal was to write it well. And, I'm just honored that you said that. And what I like, I don't know if you know Earl Grey Anderson. He's a director of MUFON, California. Okay. What Earl said is, he said, this is a book of UFO literature. That's what he called it. And I said, I love that phrase. I love that phrase. I do realize that there are some people that are not going to like. There are some people that are not going to like this book because it doesn't follow the typical pattern and plan. And I didn't feel I had to. I had a couple of agendas in writing the book. One of them was to engage people that maybe wouldn't normally read a UFO themed book. So that was one goal, is to bring in people that maybe would come at this from a different angle. I'm really going at the philosophical angle, and I'm really striving for a literary quality there. It's fiction. I didn't want to be boxed into telling a personal story. I wanted it to. I wanted the latitude to say what I wanted to say. Some of it is based on true experience, and some of it is not. And some of it is just I'm condensing things from disparate experiences so that it has a literary kind of flow to it.
So when you say experiences, are you talking about your experiences?
Correct. So my experiences. So some things in the book are true, some things are not, and I'm not trying to befuddle anyone with that. I do have a nonfiction book which we'll talk about afterwards. That's coming up. But my goal was hopefully to appeal to. I mean, you don't write a book and say I'm writing it so this person likes it. That's not what inspires me, at least, to write a book. What the real inspiration behind it was coming into this subject matter, and I would say I'm a relative newbie to the subject matter, in that after reading the New York Times articles, after reading Jeff Kripal's books, I would say that set me off on a journey from which I'm still in full progress of.
I just want to ask you about that. So you're an experiencer to a degree, right? But
Yes.
your foray, your sort of introduction to, I guess, the literature of this or the mass interest of this was the 2017 news articles. How do you get from the news articles, which are really about like disclosure and the government knows something, all that, to Jeff Kripal, who's not about that?
Right. Well, I would say that those articles opened my mind, and I'm truly not interested in government disclosure. I'm really not interested in that. I see all the fighting amongst the UFO groups, and we'll talk about that to some degree. I really don't think. I kind of think disclosures kind of happened already, and also it hasn't happened, and it's going to remain a mystery on some level, I believe, because the government doesn't know what to say, partially. Like many of the things in ufology, for me, when I read Jeff's books, it's funny. One of the things that happened was I had just finished a book of short stories called Falling from Trees. I read Jeff's book, The Flip, and I wrote to Jeff, I think, immediately, and I said, Jeff, I feel like I read your book before I wrote my book of short stories. And we kind of corresponded. He said, "This, by the way, this happens all the time. I get these kind of comments." My experience, my UFO-related experiences have a lot to do with the dreams. I have very intense dreams. Some of them are in the book. I continue to have them. When I look back, I've always had them. I think that it's like that book, Time Loops by Eric Wargo. One of the things that happens when you, at least for me, one of the things that has happened to me is that when you get flipped, when you get tuned in, turned on, you begin to look back and it feels like the pieces come together. So for instance, I feel like I've been preparing all my life to write about this subject, to engage with this subject. I just didn't know it. The psychedelic experiences, the studying philosophy of mind when I was an undergrad, studying philosophy of science, being very interested in cosmology, being very interested in Buddhism and metaphysics. These kind of all laid the groundwork, being very interested in Jung, shamanism. As I look back, I say these were all preparatory works. These are all preparatory practices to get to being able to understand this subject matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. But so when you say dreams, how do you parse out the difference between a normal dream and something you think is more?
What was a normal dream and?
Something that you think is more. Not just your own unconscious giving you stuff, but coming from, I don't know, the enigmatic other, as Terence McKenna would say.
Well, I kind of feel that all dreams are sourced in that river. I feel, and I feel that dreams have a reality of their own. It's not like, oh, that was just a dream and only. I think there's a profound reality in dreams. Now it's different, it's different like the reality you might have in an OBE or a near-death experience or in a psychedelic experience. They're different of a kind, but those rivers, I believe, go into the same ocean. So when I have those dreams, I feel like it's the phenomena reaching out symbolically to me and communicating something to me, drawing me in. So they're so powerfully real. I often write them down. I keep a dream journal, and I use my dreams in my writing. It's not uncommon. So sometimes overtly, and sometimes I'm just taking dream material and writing it in a fictional way.
So where do you think that the phenomenon exists then, or do you think it's all over the place?
I kind of agree with Jeff that it's an and or. I don't doubt. I mean, there's data, there's significant data that there's something physical that happens that comes into our reality, and in different ways. It may come in as a UFO, a bright shining object with blinking lights. It may come in as an apparition. It may come in as a near-death experience. But I also think there's a psychological component to it as well that doesn't negate that physical reality. There is something. A part of that is, I think, we're looking at the world through our minds. And the UFO phenomena has very much wrapped up in our perception. And it's sort of, we can't step out of ourselves to see it. So when we talk about things like government disclosure, I mean, part of it is that we're wrapped up in it as much as it's something independent and out there too.
Right. Yeah, the idea of disclosure, I guess, well, let's just put it on the table. Do you think that they know what there is to disclose? Do you think they know all this? Or it's like, well, something's going on, but we can't disclose that we don't really know?
Yeah, I think they don't know quite how to report on it. It's something
it's not for them. I guess that's the thing. It's kind of like what we're really saying is it's not their field of expertise. This isn't politics. This isn't military. And so if we're looking to politicians and military for something that, sort of transcends and includes the human mind, there's going to be a problem there.
Exactly. It's and I realize I don't have the final answer on it. I don't purport to have the final answer. But for me, it's been a calling. I look at, I've read since undergraduate Jung's alchemical texts. And, I was always engaged and drawn to them. I couldn't tell you exactly why, especially as an undergrad. now studying ufology, I feel like I understand better. I understand the alchemical texts. I understand it's a kind of a symbolism that's drawing us to a deeper place. And it can't say, well, go here and do this exactly. It has to point there symbolically. And we try to find our way to that place of, let's say, self-actualization. Not that you become, I don't feel like I'm this, all wise, profoundly knowledgeable guru. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a calling to a deeper understanding.
That's interesting, because I think that is true, and I think just as maybe westernized, I guess, human beings, we treat it like the same way that we treat literature, the same way we treat the Bible, the same way we treat The Simpsons and cartoons, which is like the vast majority of people seem to only be interested in, or maybe only comprehend, the literal facade of it, and then there's the subtext that other people read into it, and then there's the pulled back perspective of understanding, wait a minute, there's a literal and a subtext, what's going on? There seems to be, so it seems like the if you're looking at sort of consciousness as a pyramid scheme, the base is always going to be the most obvious thing. So the most people are always going to be in tune with the most obvious thing. So it's almost as though, even though this is calling us to not see it as aliens and not see it as the sci-fi thing we think it is, the majority of us are always going to be stuck there in some way. Do you think that's true, or is that too cynical?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are. It's interesting that when you have some information come out, you had those that, let's just say, that New York Times article, or other kinds of public, the Grush testimonies. People hear it, they listen to it, and then they just don't care. It seems like most people are just not interested in this. I love what Michio Kaku said. He said, the onus is now on the government to tell us, there's data here. There's a trail of data. The onus is on them now, or some body of some organization, scientific or otherwise, to better explain this. Now, I don't think a scientific only, given our current science, is going to be able to explain this. I don't think it's just it falls just in the logical realm. I think it needs more than it needs a more comprehensive, and it needs a more philosophical framework to look at this. You look at, I like the work of, I think the work of Daniel Hoffman has a lot to do with this. That our consciousness evolved to make us fit to survive. It didn't evolve to make us to understand, like, the truth in quotes. We don't see things as themselves, the things in themselves. We see things in the context of, the constructs of our consciousness. If I look at an object, an everyday object, and someone from, the Amazon, someone who's never left the Amazon looks at an object like a battery or something, that person is not gonna, they don't see the thing in itself. They don't see the essence of it. They come to it with the context of knowledge that helps them put that object into some understanding. Just like it's just interesting that the phenomena, it evolves, and it's seen and experienced in different ways in different cultures. There's often light involved. There's this, bright, illuminating light. That seems to be something that occurs throughout cultures. Sometimes it's orbs. It has been chariots before. It's a Catholic saint to some. It looks like what you look like sometimes. And that's
Right.
why I say it's wrapped up in our consciousness. And that's not to say, therefore, it's not a thing out there. That's not what I'm saying. But it presents itself somehow in a way that fits into a language that we can comprehend.
So what is it about UFO subject now? Because if you're someone who believes that dreams are actually more than just your own unconscious talking to yourself, then there's a whole bunch of stuff you could have glommed onto and said, oh, this is calling to me. And there's a whole bunch of ways you could have contextualized Carl Jung or the philosophies that you were reading. So what is it about UFOs where you were like, oh, that actually has a depth to it that I need to look at? Because on the surface, you wouldn't necessarily think that, as someone looking at, again, the disclosure stuff, or even most of ufology, which is a circus. So have you thought about that? Like, what is it that jumped out at you? Like, this is it.
Yeah, I mean, just for one thing, Jung wrote about, and I'm sure you've read it. Jung wrote about this, and one of the things that he said is the UFO is when that experience could be like a synchronicity, and I think synchronicity is often misunderstood the way Jung used it or meant it. There was the incident with the scarab. He had a patient who was sort of a patient he was having a hard time having a breakthrough with, and she was describing some dream that she had, and I think the dream was about a scarab, and there was a kind of banging on the window where I believe it was in Zurich, where Jung was with her. She was a patient in his office. And he opened the window, and there was a scarab that was banging on the window. And he showed her the scarab. What Jung said is that there was a kind of mutual engagement that she enabled the manifestation of this thing. And in a similar way, I think, first of all, I've had a lot of UFO dreams. So they come to me in a very present, a very real way, very profound way, moving way. So there's something that's trying to break through from the dream world.
Your book, For All We Know, there's sort of I don't know, it's not on the front cover, but on the inside it says a UFO manifesto. What makes this a manifesto?
Well, it's the story of the narrator's, the arc of I would say awakening. It begins with I intentionally, of course there are memoirish aspects of it. It's not a on the nose book, as you said, as we both said at the outset. This character is not really he's not a believing type. He's not a trusting type. He's from a kind of hard place, a little hard scrabble time in New York City in the 70s. He's one to doubt the veracity of what people tell him. So that, to me, was an important theme, that he's not I go and believe everything everybody says. And he also is someone that is not in touch with nature, someone that is, you're from the city, he's an urban kid. He calls all birds birds, all trees trees, because he doesn't know. He hasn't had that. When I met my wife, she would be able to point to trees and say, the varieties of trees. And I asked her, well, how do you know? She said, well, from the leaf. Now, it may sound silly to you, right? But to me, this is part of that discovery, because for me, the discovery, this journey is not just about, it's not just extraterrestrial, it's terrestrial. There is intelligence abundant here, right here and now. As I walk out my house, I live in Brooklyn, but believe it or not, well, you know, Jeremy, because you've lived in New York. There are trees, there are birds, there are insects. It's thriving and exploding with life. It's not the this discovery of awakening is not just about looking up, it's about looking in, and it's about looking around, and it's about listening and paying attention. So that's why I say that. That's why I call it a UFO manifesto. Everyone probably has their own. I think there are elements of this that people can relate to just because they've written to me and I've had those interactions and correspondences and sometimes phone calls. But for me, does that make sense to you? That this is a book. It's not just a book about looking up and seeing a shiny disc in the sky. It's a book about discovery.
Well, that's right. And it's, rare is the chapter on the shiny disc in the sky. It's really about, we've got chapters that are about the tree as the UFO, the this as the UFO, the that as the UFO. Which is symbolic of which? Because you could say, well, I'll just put that out there. Which is symbolic of which?
I mean, there are many ways to enter the circle. So it's in a way, ufology is for me a lot like mythology, and it's using symbols to evoke the journey of the mind, to this tendency of consciousness to make these explorations. I mean, I don't know for sure. I don't have the absolute answer on what it is that we're perceiving and what it is that we're encountering. I mean, some people have very precise answers. They can tell you where they're from. They can tell you in great detail. And I listen, but I don't have that same certitude. I'm more in a state of mystery and awe. And so, I have a chapter on I am the UFO. That this body is a vehicle. And in a way it is. I mean, it's I am the earth. Everything I've ever eaten, everything I've ever consumed is of this earth. It's of dirt, soil, from rivers, from plants and animals. I am just a vehicle for the life force to move through. I mean, of course, more than that too, but I am that.
So, do you need some enigmatic other to tell you that?
Do you need an enigmatic other to tell you that? I mean, I think, like what you said, the enigma, the discovery of the enigma is where the experience is. Many of us, and I understand, many of us want to live we don't want to be disturbed by enigma. Enigma is kind of scary. It's a better place, a cleaner place to feel, well, I'm in control of everything. I'm in control of my job. I'm in control of my life. It all makes sense. I have my whatever, and things fit into a slot. The enigma, the whatever gets you to the enigma, whatever helps you discover it, and many people come at this in different ways. Some people come at it, Jeff comes at it, Kripal, from a very intellectual perspective. He's never had a UFO experience.
But I'm thinking in terms of, like if you come from a nature culture who's in tune with the web of life, they don't need to be reminded of that. It's really just westernized people. So what do you think the relationship is for them with this type of stuff then? If you don't need that wake-up call, what's the thing that is communicated to you?
I think even if you're from any culture, yeah, I mean, any culture you're from, you still have to go through experiences, a walkabout in some way. You still have to make it your own. ritual is, one way to kind of ritual manifests the symbols, and it's a kind of, walks you through life and death and the experience of death. And we have these rituals. They're abound in religions. We always have to go through them, even if we're immersed in a culture that's open to this. I mean, I've read, Native Americans having experiences. Not uncommon to have experiences of encounters with people from the sky people. So it's, yet not all of those people believe in it. Some people are afraid to believe in it. They're, what is it, Andy Sixkiller, right? The writer who's written about this in South America and all over North America. And it's interesting because she would meet people on the reservation, off the reservation, and they would tell experiences. Some were terrified to talk about it because they were afraid to be ostracized for whatever reason. And I also feel that, even if you're, immersed in that culture, it's still something you have to go through yourself.
So do you think it matters the depth to which you go through it? So in other words, Jeff Kripal, he's had a couple of, experiences, not necessarily UFO related, that put him on the path of this, looking into these things. But like you said, he keeps it intellectual. He doesn't even want to do psychedelics. He just wants to do the intellectual stuff and stay himself. Do you think that's good enough, or do you think there has to be a quote unquote personal evolution or something with this, or you're not doing a disservice?
I guess everyone has to go through their own experience. I would never encourage anyone to seek more than they can they have appetite for, because I think it also puts you in a state of confusion, to have this understanding that, well, everything I see may not exactly be what I think it is. The origins of human life may not be what I think it is. As I understand the universe, it may be completely different than what I think. I know people that, I have a friend who, my wife and I, it's a couple, and we would go out camping, and I said, I want to sit out and look at the stars. I just love to lie down and look at the stars. And she says, oh, it terrifies me. I don't want to look up at all that vastness, and it makes me uncomfortable. And who am I to push her and say, well, you have to do this? I think you're on the journey that you should be on, that you ought to be on. And when you're ready for what you're ready for, you'll go after it. And it's a very individual thing. And people experience it in very different ways on very different levels. When you have a psychedelic experience, or you have something that's an ontological shock, as John Mack used that term, and that could happen in many ways, that really punctures a hole in what could be a cozy understanding of things. And that may set you on a journey to discovery. It also may turn you off.
Does it matter if we're killing ourselves off as a species? If global warming at our hands ends up being the extinction or sort of a dieback and the death of the configuration of humanity as we know it, something along those lines. Does it matter? Because part of me is sympathetic to what you're saying. Yes, everyone's got to go through a pace, but there's another part of me that's we don't have time for this. There's something that we have to understand, and it can't just be that we keep having personal revelations and then social amnesia, because that's a broken species. What do you say to that?
Yeah, which is kind of where we are. Yeah, ideally, we're having revelations that lead us to an appreciation of life, period, of life on this planet, sentience elsewhere, and it leads us on a path to, which I think is very much in the point of, for all we know, was very much tied up in that process of self-discovery, and that would lend itself to having a more open view and a compassionate view to climate change. And yes, that is, to me, is when I was having that discussion with my son today, we're 13 years old, because he's talking about the big technology companies and how they're taking control over the way we think, the way we vote. They influence us tremendously. We are the product. You're using Google, you're the product. And I said to him, he's 13 years old, the way you might combat that is through you study what these companies like Google do, which I think ultimately is taking over our thought process and having tremendous influence, but also coupling that with what is it that they're trying to keep us from. They're trying to keep us from looking at ourselves. They're trying to keep us from having an experience of awakening. And part of that awakening is discovering that I am that tree. I have a relationship to that tree. I have a relationship to the soil. I have a relationship to the air. And more than that, I have a relationship to beyond the earth. But we can't even, for the most part, humanity has a hard time just taking care of our own backyard. So yes, ultimately, but what I said to him is, man, that's a hard message to preach, because now it's sounding preachy. And do people want to hear that? I mean, in this country, you say, you should eat better food. Try not to drink Coca-Cola. Eat organic and healthy foods. And a big portion of the population says, stop telling me what to do. So to promote that message, I'm trying to promote that message through the writing of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But also look at the title, Jeremy. For all we know. For all we know, what if we're just gone, blip, because we've botched everything to no end, and we're headlong on this, climate change upheaval. What's the consequence of that?
Yeah, well, and it's a big consequence if there's such a thing as reincarnation, and there's nothing to reincarnate into. That might be a problem. But I don't know. Yeah. But does your son's 13, do you get a sense from him, and I don't know if his friends talk about this type of thing, but, does he see a future? When I was a kid, it's like you think about what are you going to be when you grow up and all this sort of stuff. Do they still think that way, or are they doom and gloom?
I think there's a lot of doom and gloom. They grew up in COVID. He grew up during the, he was he was in fourth grade during COVID. And, during, not to get political, but just, during a very contentious Trump presidency, where there were a lot of alternative truths floating around, and there was a lot of ugliness that was right in our face. Now, he's not a depressed kid. He isn't, I don't think he's a depressed kid. But yes, I think that they are yoked with these. When I was a kid, it was, we imagine the future would be we're solving problems. We're going to cure cancer. We're going to go interstellar flight. We're going to, it kind of felt unbounded. It felt, maybe it was innocent and naive, but there was a hopefulness to it. I don't think that that's at the moment. What I'm trying to do with my son is help him to discover what that hopefulness can be. Because yes, if you want to look at the power that these technology companies have, I don't want you to lose sleep over it. Why don't you do something about it? Investigate it, report on it. That could be dangerous too, by the way, because there are people that have done that
Right.
with consequence.
Do you talk to your son about UFOs?
Yeah.
Does he share your point of view, or does he understand it?
I think he's kind of sympathetic to it. On the UFO subject, I think it takes, specifically on that subject, I think it takes a lot of reading and thinking before you can have a certain revelation and understanding. Because, I'm sure you get this, you get the kind of chuckle and people laugh, and it doesn't offend me. I don't care. And I'm not looking to die on a hill to have a conversation about it. I'm not going to wrestle you to the ground over what you think. If you want to know what I think, I'm happy to discuss it with you. If you want to, read my book or books, you might have a good sense of where I'm coming from. So I think that I'm laying the kind of groundwork for him to think about it. And I think one of the things that inspired me about Jeff is people come to, especially in the academy, they come with blinders on. And when you look at certain data, certain things that fall outside that paradigm, they don't want to look at it. And so I agree with Jeff. Keep those things on the table. Why did Joseph of Cupertino, why was it chronicled that he could fly? And it's chronicled by many people that he could levitate during masses and other, he would have these kind of spasms, and then he would levitate. Even the Catholic Church didn't really want to talk about it. It was maybe too strange, and they've tried to suppress some of that because it's too weird. But people report on it, and more than one person, and it's chronicled by, let's just say, people of more than one type of person.
Right.
So I say to my son, well, people have these visions. And I say to my wife, I would say that neither of them are completely on board with what I'm saying. But you have testimonial accounts across cultures, across time. There must be something to this. People have these experiences. So you can either choose to put it away, put it in a box and ignore it, or you can investigate it. There are different kinds of people. I realize that. I think it's important to keep that open mind and to keep that sense of mystery. We don't have to completely understand everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's called unidentified for a reason. It's unknown and it can be unknowable. And it's funny because if you think about, I think the average sense of ego, the sense of self, the average reason that the person exists in the first place, is a barrier against the fear of non-existence, of death, of annihilation, however you want to put it. And so we are little answering machines. We seek answers, and we want to own them and control them and be them, master them, however you want to put that. But then you have something. So if you have something called the unknowable, it seems like that should be the worst thing ever, and we treat it that way. But it really is a call to dissolving that defense mechanism, to be the unknowable, as it were, to be essentially timeless, to be not a construct of psychological time, not a construct of knowledge. How do you get to something that isn't already known? You have to sort of, the knower has to dissolve, and then if there's some truth there, it'll be the case. I think that's kind of where this thing is pointing to me. But
yeah, and what you've described sounds very much like, a Buddhist metaphysics. Mm-hmm. The Dalai Lama talks about nothingness, and how, when we look at the world, you can reduce the world to it's made up of nothing. If you go and you look at, in the not in that book. I have in another book. This I'm having a conversation with my 13-year-old son, who wasn't 13 at the time, about his mother's ring, the wedding ring. And I say, well, where did the metal from that ring come from? And where in the earth did it come from? And what the mountains that it came from? And a million years hence, where was it as it was, it existed in some disparate form, not yet kind of come together. Who were the people that brought it from wherever it originated, and it was then worked by some specialist who built it into shape? What will it be in 1 million years from now? 2 million years from now? So it's a kind of, it exists here and now. It's here, I can see it, but it's ephemeral, like we are. What you were just saying kind of reminded me of that. That's a kind of discovery of you settle with that. You settle with that unknowing. You become calm with it. You meditate on it. You don't hold on to it. There may be some benefit to that, to having that state of mind.
It's interesting, to put it in Jeff Ritzmann terms, he talks about humans are comprised essentially of two-ness and oneness, of non-duality and duality, I guess you would say. And we sort of intuit that. Like we're all, obviously we know ourselves as two or more, diversity. But when it comes to oneness, we tend to hold on to that as a theory. Like it gives us a good feeling, an oogly-googly feeling inside to think we're all one. But we don't actually ever, the two-ness of us rarely dissolves for oneness to be the authentic case. And I wonder what that is, since that is our, maybe a Buddhist would say that's your true face, right? If that's our true face, they're both our true face, but if that's the true or your true face, what do you think it is about us that is so resistant, even though in theory we love, want, and seek that? Why do you think we don't do what it takes to be that?
I think it's easier to be to live in a world where you can count all your eggs, and I think that's an illusion. But nevertheless, it's a control thing. I mean, here you are in this unknowable situation where you could die any moment. Someone could die any moment. You could lose everything you have. That's kind of terrifying. And we see death all around us. We see terrible things happening. So to have a sense of, this is all mine. This here, I have control. I watched my mom, and it's some of that's in the book. She passed away 2 years ago. Man, was she holding on tight. She was holding on so tightly to life. And which kind of surprised me, really, for all she taught us in growing up and how she taught us to be adaptable, to live, and to be tenacious. Man, she held on so tightly. I'm not faulting her for it. I'm looking and just saying, well, how do I learn from this? Mm-hmm. And there we were. There was a point at which she was such a strong person that we were saying, Mom, it's okay if you go now. You can go. You can go now. I'm not making a joke of this. At the time, it's that like nervous laughter thing. Mm-hmm. But man, that's so profound, to be that close to death. I think those things scare people. I mean, they scare me too. I'm not above it.
Yeah.
There are moments, I've had my moments where I feel the oneness. There are moments, and sometimes they linger. But I've also had my moments, more often than not, where that isn't the case.
It is interesting that there are certain events like that, like being at the deathbed of a loved one, where you can have an experience that is a lot like a UFO encounter in a way. Because I remember when my mom's dad died, my grandfather, he was lying he was in an old age home with my grandmother. He had rolled out of bed, I guess, and that was, put him into a coma, essentially. So he's in a hospital bed, in the hospital portion of this place, of this old age home, and I went and visited him for the first time there. And so it was like me, my sister might have been there, I don't remember, my mom, and I think my uncles. And I think they were arguing about something or talking about something. My grandfather, woke up for a second. He has tubes in his mouth. He's in a coma. He's dying. And he looked like he woke up, and he sort of looked at me, cocked his head quizzically, and he looked like he was trying to say something. And I thought that maybe he didn't want me to see him in that state, and he knew who I was at that point, knew I was there, and was like, get out, I don't want you to see me like this, or something. That was just my sort of immediate feeling. But he was definitely trying to say something, and then that was it. And then he sort of lay back down and was back in the coma. And then we walked back to the old age home portion of the place where my grandmother was, and he passed away while we were walking there. And the thing that's sort of UFO-ish about it is there's this mystery communication from beyond, almost from a liminal state of the betwixt and between of death and life, really. And my mom doesn't remember that at all. And I think it's because she was sort of arguing with my uncles, but she I can't even talk to her about it because I've tried, and she gets sort of this little pissy sort of attitude about that didn't happen. And all of that is a reflection of a UFO situation, right? That is all exactly, I saw this thing, we were all there, but the person next to me doesn't see it and is angry if you try to say that, and it's a communication from something else, So in a way, it is oddly natural the way that they communicate. As supernatural as it is all around us if we see it, if we know how to look, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And there's that, when you have that kind of, when you awaken to that, you begin to see it manifest in different ways. When my mom was transitioning, as the nurses said, she had this kind of great overlook in her eyes, and she was clearly going through some encounters and experiences, and seeing people and things, and she had looks on her face of surprise and sometimes other. And she wasn't trying to communicate. She was just going through. She would look at and way through you, But it's very much like people come back from these experiences, and then they seem like dreams. They seem like dreams because they have a hard time explaining them. They have a hard time. The experience is very fleeting. Somehow dreams are very bound up with them, in my opinion. And they have similar characteristics. If you tell someone you had a dream, they'll just say, "Oh, well, it's just a dream anyway." It's sort of brushed off. But when you're in that dream moment, there's a reality that's so palpable, and real. And I don't think dreams are just fantasies. I think they are a part of us. There's some Tibetan yogis that practice dream yoga. And the idea is that if you can be lucid in your dreams, if you could wake up in your dreams, and you can wake up in your life, because we're always dreaming, we're always creating, we're always fantasizing, we're always manufacturing the reality that we seem to be so attached to. And if we could have that revelation, then there's some awakening there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an interesting perspective. And the UFO experience or the UFO calling is a sort of it's a challenge to look at these things that we can't completely explain, to be comfortable with them, to let them be fleeting and ephemeral. Sometimes they're terrifying. To some people, they're absolutely terrifying. Some people, they're illuminated, bright, beautiful, and just the most wonderful feelings. So it's not one kind of thing.
Well, it's also, I guess, just interesting as you're saying this. Like, now I'm thinking about seeing a UFO going to Vermont with my mom and sister, and it is, it's a round green object with porthole windows spinning in the sky, essentially. And, it looks completely fake and phony, and it looks amazing. And my mom sees it first, and then I see it. My sister can't see it for some reason, I think because she's sitting in the passenger seat, and it's sort of angled above the car. My mom's driving, and I'm on that side in the back seat, so maybe she can't see it from the angle of the roof, but she goes back to reading her book. And I remember this forever. This impresses upon me and sort of predicts the rest of my life in a certain sense, whereas my sister just didn't care, and my mom forgot about it until the Gulf Breeze sighting started coming out on Unsolved Mysteries. And I was like, look, it looked as fake as that, as green as that. It didn't look exactly like that thing, but you would swear it was as phony looking as that. And don't you remember? And then she remembered, and then it came back to her. And we have this sense in ufology a lot of the times that something like that means that, you're like, there's the trope of your family or your friends who are involved in a sighting like that are turned off and you're turned on because it's for you, it's not for them. But I think what we're kind of talking about here in a way is like, it would be for them if they latched onto it. And the thing that's interesting is, like, again, you can see this dynamic in a crime. Somebody commits a crime, 3 people see it, and they see it differently. But the difference is, with the UFO phenomenon, if you see it the right way, it responds and comes a-knocking. Right? So which is what happened with me. But that's not because it was for me, necessarily. It's because I saw it the way I saw it, or I had the interest in it that I had. And if they did, would it have come knocking for them too? So, in a way, it's like, there are certain, I guess what I'm saying is there are certain mechanics to how we see these things that seem as though they might be singularly something that you experience with a phenomenon, but they're not, because again, think about how different witnesses see a crime differently, blah, blah. The thing that's different, really, the only thing that's different, is that we see it in a rarefied state, just like seeing a crime, hopefully, is a rarefied thing. So we see it in a rarefied state, and then how much you give to it, energy you give to it, is how much you get back. It becomes this feedback loop. That's different. And I guess we're talking about that in terms of the ultimate end to that seems to be a wake-up call of some sort. But do you think that is a wake-up call for anyone who could see that? Like, if my mom and sister had been just as interested in it, would they have not forgotten about it or not? You know what I mean? Like, and then ended up in a feedback loop too? Or am I spent? It comes back to that. Is it about the person?
I guess it's about where that person is at that time. And it's so weird that the data, that photos are always bad. Right. That videos are always, weird. It's very trickstery. It's very, it's almost like laughing at you that it's not going to give you the answer on the nose. It's gonna, you have to go through this. You have to go through a process of discovery and understanding. So I do think that, I mean, I have a friend who is a professor of writing, and he read my book. You know, he's a friend, so of course he's, you know, making fun of me and everything. Good book. I really liked your book. You know, I don't believe in UFOs. But, you know, I had a UFO experience. I was with my mother and sister. Oh, really? So tell me. Well, we were in, I think he's in Massachusetts, and he was in wherever they were. There was this like kind of valley, and there's no military installation. There's nothing military there. They all three see this thing pretty significantly far away, well lit up, and then just zipped away. I said, so what did you think you saw? I don't know, but it looked like a UFO. Isn't that strange? Here's a guy who he's an absolute, a typical academic in his, and I adore him really very much, but a typical academic in how he approaches these kinds of things, even in his understanding of science. Not to say that I have this elevated, higher, more sophisticated view. You know, I do think that science is also viewed through the context of our time. There's, there's the book by Steven Weinberg. I hate the title of it, Dreams of a Final Theory. So he's trying to make Einstein's theory of gravity, and he's trying to sort out and combine these theories to say that it'll be a final theory. But of course it won't be a final theory. How silly is that to think? We're going to have continuous states of improved understanding, of better understanding, but they will always be incomplete. Maybe we can make better technology because of breakthroughs in understanding, but there's not going to be, I don't think there's going to be this final state where we know everything. Maybe that final state is where we understand that we truly don't know anything.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a better state. I'm not sure. But there's if I can just expand on that, there's a book called, is Evolution a Social Construct? So the philosopher Michael Ruse talks about how, he's not saying that evolution, he doesn't believe in evolution. He's not saying that, evolution isn't true science. What he looks at different scientists and their view of evolution and how, where they're from and their context kind of influence their view of evolution. So you look at Darwin, the industrial age of Britain, of England, and that very much colored his survival of the fittest and his definitions and view. There's the scientist Lynn Margulis. She was the wife of Carl Sagan, and she had this notion of coevolution, which is ecosystems co-evolve. She was laughed at the time that it was a silly idea, that ecosystems co-evolve, that plants and and the insects and the chemicals that the plants excrete, and this relationship between all of these living and non-living entities work together. The way Michael Ruse says is she sort of had this hippie view of it, right? This like Gaia hippie view of it. But her perspective influenced how she looked at the science. It's not this absolute and final statement. It's our science is dominated by a paradigm which will shift when new ideas come in. That doesn't mean that those older ideas don't have some validity. They just don't have the entire truth.
Right. Well, it's sad because this to me reminds me of like, yes, we think we're discovering things, we think with our magical science we're evolved, but really we're the children in the room, because Teoxin Ghost Horse, Lakota speaker, talks about how, the birds talk to the trees and the trees talk to the birds. That's why they're always chirping in the tree. They're not always talking to each other. Sometimes they're talking to the tree, seeing what the tree needs. And there's this give and take. And that's pretty much exactly what she's talking about. So it's not a new theory. It's actually what people who are so scientifically minded because they are embedded in nature, no, they already know that, but we don't listen to them. We go, oh, that's an old way of thinking. That's stupid or savage or whatever. And I get that we're coming out of that now, sort of, but still not. We still want to tiptoe because we still want to be the ones in charge, in control, and evolved. And I don't know. It's just one of them pet peeves of mine. But let's. I guess we sort of we're at the end of our time here, and I want to talk about your new book coming up. But I just want to say, everyone out there who likes the UFO lit, get For All We Know, and not only will you enjoy it, but I think it's a great way to give it to your friend who maybe doesn't have an interest in this stuff. And or your friend who does but thinks it's all disclosure or whatever, because as he's saying, it's a novel, but it's a lot of his own actual truth to it, and I think the sort of philosophical perspective that it brings to the table is in the direction that we need to be looking or thinking about these things, and so I think you could end up, what do they call it, red pilling? Is it the red pill or the blue pill? I don't know what the Matrix metaphor is, but give it to your friend and see if it doesn't sort of change their perspective a bit on this. I think it's a good book for that, but also you'll enjoy it because it's a good work of literature on its own. So there's that.
Well, I really appreciate that. It's so satisfying to hear, and I hope that the book serves that purpose for people. And you don't write you always have an agenda when you write in a book. You write a book, you're trying to say something. I was hoping, I had given the book The Flip to a friend who's a musician, who's a very inspiring and inspired musician. He read the book and he said, but why did you give it to me? And I realized, I said, he's already flipped. It wasn't really meant for him. I just, as an intellectual thing, I gave him this book. But in a like manner, like just what you said, the friends that I have that are, literary people that only read literary stuff and won't read a UFO book, I was hoping that those types might bite on it. So yes. And the new book that I'm working on, UFO Symphonic. So this, it's a collection of my stories. They're stories that I've gotten from other people. Very profound stories that people have told me, and I gauged. I didn't critique what people told me. I knew the people I was talking to, and I didn't know them personally. I don't mean to say that. I could gauge that this was a bona fide story, that they're telling me something that they believe that happened. Some were scientists, some were a woman who's an epidemiologist, some are musicians. The stories aren't all the same. Some are they're prosaic. I think some of my stories are kind of prosaic. Some are absolutely fantastic and incredible. And I do go into trying to not critique their stories. I try to weave together some understanding of kind of like what we've discussed here, I hope in a cohesive manner, trying to, if nothing else, help myself to have a framework that I can talk about this stuff in a manner that's sober, in a manner that's translatable, and that can engage people. Because I think one thing I would hope that we can do is bring more people into the fold. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And I don't know, Jeremy, if you see my posts on Facebook and other social media, I post about other things. We can have other things in this conversation. They don't have to be just one thing. It just doesn't have to be UFO on the nose. We can bring this conversation in the fold through many subject matter. So that was my hope and goal. That book will be out It looks like toward the end of this year, and I'll provide updates on that as it goes through its process. It's in production right now.
Okay, great.
So, yeah, and thank you so much. I really appreciate just from our contact and, giving me the trust to have the conversation, to read the book. I really appreciate your taking the time, and it's been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of your podcasts.
Well, yeah, and thanks for doing this. My only regret is that Jeff Ritzmann isn't here, because I think he would have loved this conversation. So thank you for giving us a Paratopia-worthy conversation, for sure.
You're listening to the Platinum Standard in Paranormal Talk, Paratopia, with Jeff Ritzmann and Jeremy Vaeni.
Paratopia, we have yet another special guest. That's right. This is a twofer. Allison Jornlin, who I actually met. Allison, hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You barely
Aloha.
contain yourself. Yes, aloha.
Aloha. I wanted to visit Paratopia for so long. You don't even know.
Oh, wow. I didn't know, but you did visit Hawaii.
Fan.
You visited Hawaii, what was it, last year that we met?
I know, but it's not the same as being on Paratopia with you, Jeremy.
Well, that's true. It's better.
It's quite a thrill. I'm really being honest.
There are two things that I right up front respect about your work. So Allison is a haunted history researcher, paranormal researcher, all that fun stuff. But she's also specializes in women in parapsychology and the such, who have, I don't know, what would you say? I mean, it's women in general who don't get enough press, but throughout history who have actually been influencers and highly influential, and the men sort of took the credit. I think that's probably fair to say, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. So there's so many like female trailblazers out there that really built the foundations of psychical research, paranormal investigation as we know it today, and of course parapsychology. And there's living women still working in those fields as well. But when you look back at the history, you find out about these amazing women if you dig deep enough. Otherwise, you just hear about the men. And why is that? Why is it that everybody talks about the forefathers and forgets about the foremothers? This is the cosmic androgyne, people. We have to have both of the genders represented. And, if you don't do that, then you're missing a big part of the picture. And, who wants to do that these days? Today, we can have it all in terms of information. So let's appreciate that.
Yeah. And so that's what we're going to focus on mainly, but I got to get this out of the way, because so we met, you were doing American Ghost Walks, which is a haunted history sort of touring thing that you do in Milwaukee, but you wanted to, I guess, bring that around the country at least. And so you were in Hawaii, and the thing that impressed me was I don't know that any other ghost tour type situation does this, but you were caring about cultural sensitivity, about not just being like, oh, look, it's haunted, and going and sort of trampling sacred areas, for instance, or lying. Or, you know what I mean? So,
it's a whole lot easier to run a haunted history tour if you just make stuff up. Right. But that's not what we do. Our Holy Grail is the true ghost story, real ghost stories. That's what we are searching for, and that's what we're doing our best to present to our guests. And I started with haunted history tours by writing one for my home city, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in 2008. And then I got my brother involved, and we started American Ghost Walks, and it's a family business, and we're in 7 states and Puerto Rico now. And the main way we get to other areas is there's a lot of mom and pop haunted history tours that are started around the country, and the people do that for many years, for decades, and then they want to retire. And we're friends with a lot of people in the field just because we love ghost stories, and they tend to contact us when they want to retire. So we've compensated people, those people, to carry on and take control of their intellectual property and carry it on the way they would want it carried on after they want to retire. And then if we ever go into an area that's not like that, we build our own tour from the ground up, and we try not to trample on anybody else's tour. Our idea is like the more the merrier. Honest competition is okay. It brings the spotlight onto haunted history, and we should have as many haunted history tours as we can to serve people like me, who anytime they go on vacation, they don't just take one haunted history tour. They ask themselves, what are all the haunted amenities in this location that I can avail myself of? And they take all the tours, they stay at the haunted locations, they eat at the haunted restaurants. I'm trying to serve myself. Those other clones out there who want the same weird stuff I want, but want the real history and the authentic ghost stories. And that's what I'm aiming to provide.
But the thing you neglected to tell me, Allison, and this really hurts.
What's that?
You and your brother brought this to Shark Tank.
Oh yeah. Okay. So why did that hurt? I don't.
That's awesome. I would love to know. You brought this to Shark Tank. How did that go?
Okay, so they do, make you sign something to say that you won't give like details. But I am going to say this, because we did not reach out to them. They reached out to us because for the first time they were having a complete Halloween themed show, and they wanted Halloween themed businesses. So they reached out to us, and we're not looking for investors, especially investors, just some randos that don't know anything about this business. Although when we were on the show, I must say my brother got this extreme man crush for Jason Blum or Bloom. I'm not sure. Still don't know how to pronounce it. Sorry. But I'm like, Mike, we don't want him as an investor because he deals in fiction. That's not what we deal in. So, but there was a little bit of a man crush going on there. For me, I was just like, well, if Shark Tank asks you to be on, you do all the things that they require you to do, and then you do it. If they ask you to be on, you do it. So it was a great experience. It was super fun, to get flown out for free and stay for free in LA and get, right around in those little cars around the lot. To go to the different buildings where they stage it all. And so that was amazing. So it was really fun. We did not get a deal, but that was what I at least wanted. I mean, I thought, oh man, if we get like attached to some of these rich and famous people, that might not be a good thing. Like everybody thinks that's a good thing. And I look to people who are rich and famous and I think about, well, how did they get that way? Right. Maybe I should run in the other direction.
But you probably got some free press out of it, right? So
yes.
That works out.
We really
what
did.
Year was this?
This was just last year. It aired on October 27th. You can still watch the episode on Hulu.
Oh, I'm going to go looking for it.
I haven't, but you can watch it if you want.
All right. So let me, I want to circle back to women in the paranormal
but I know we're going to be talking specifically, at least up front here, about a Hawaiian woman. So let me just ask you the cultural question, which is like, what are the concerns when you're doing ghost walk stuff, or you're even researching for the Paranormal Women, website, paranormalwomen.com? Is it the same sensitivities that you have to bring to, say, Milwaukee that you would to Hawaii, or do you have to tiptoe more in Hawaii?
Yeah, well, Hawaii is a different culture. So, and I shouldn't say culture like that, because there's a confluence of cultures there. There's many different people who came to Hawaii, and a lot of them were from different Asian countries, and there's also a lot of Portuguese immigrants. So there's a lot of different belief systems that come together, which make for a great folklore tapestry. But you have to approach it in a way that where you're ready for your preconceived notions to just get out of there, because I even find with the tours that I've written in Hawaii, some people take the tours and they're like, where were the ghosts? There were no ghosts, like in the review. Great. But it's because we're talking about things that they don't maybe think of as ghosts, because, as the great ghost historian, late ghost historian of Hawaii, Glenn Grant, once said, in Hawaii, there are ghosts, but they're not the sheet-wearing, chain-rattling variety that we might be more used to in the West. They are something often more sacred than that, like the Aumakua. The Aumakua is the family guardian, or sometimes known as the family god. So these are ancestors coming back, but then they present themselves not so often in human form, but in other natural forms, usually animals that we're familiar with, like the owl, for example, or the shark. But they can also present themselves in ways that we wouldn't expect, like as a supernatural creature called the mo'o, which is my favorite. And this is usually women appear in this way, but not always, but mostly women will, some of them will come back as the Aumakua of the mo'o. And the mo'o is a 30-foot jet black, very formidable lizard creature. And these creatures, they predominantly guard freshwater sources. So this is something I didn't know until several trips into Hawaii, that they had these spirits called the mo'o, who could present as a beautiful woman or a beautiful man in a few cases, and then could transform, shapeshift into a quite fearsome lizard creature. So that's an example of something that is undoubtedly paranormal, but does not present itself as, the run-of-the-mill garden variety Western ghost.
Right. Okay. Yeah. In fact, the mo'o lives right up the road from me here.
Oh yeah.
Yes, supposedly. I haven't been up there because I don't know how treacherous of a ride it is on our car, but yeah.
Yes, or how treacherous it is to actually go to the spot. But many mo'o are benevolent, and they do protect those sources of fresh water. But that's an example of something that is supernatural, but maybe people don't appreciate the spiritual nature of it or something, or they're looking for just the standard variety ghost. And there are lots of people in the Hawaiian Islands that have the same media references that we do. So, you will find some of that, but I like to dig deep and find the surprising things. That's what's interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, let's now turn our attention to who is the woman that you were telling me about right before we went on the air, and why were you telling me about her?
Okay, so my website, it's a blog. It's called paranormalwomen.com, and I showcase women in the paranormal who have really, made a difference, and have made a difference principally by being investigators. And the woman that I'm going to focus on today is someone that I'm actively working on a blog article about. And her name is Lahaina A. Gay. And we can just call her what her friends and her husband called her, which is Lahe. She's also known as Rebecca Hart Gay, but changed her name to that Hawaiian name a little bit later in life. So Lahaina A was very interested in her Hawaiian heritage. Now, she wasn't full-blood Hawaiian, but she did learn from elders. She did have Anglo blood, Hawaiian blood, and some Native American blood from the mainland. And she was taught by elders in Kauai, actually. And so as she was growing up, she was taking in all these cultural teachings. And she started to notice that all around her, these sacred sites were being pillaged by relic hunters who just wanted to sell whatever they could steal on the black market. And she became increasingly upset about that because all these cultural treasures were being lost. And she also felt a calling to another way that the Aumakua, or family guardian, can manifest, which is the pohaku. Have you ever heard of the pohaku, Jeremy?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you know of the pohaku?
I don't remember.
Okay, that's okay.
I've definitely heard of pohaku. I just have no idea what it is.
Okay, well, it is a sacred stone. And there are many sacred stones around the islands, and they were revered as the final resting place of many ancestors. Like the soul of this ancestor decided that when he or she came back, or they came back and wanted to be embodied in stone. And that's really cool. And it's something that's a little bit different than the Western idea of the afterlife. The way I look at the Polynesian view, and, just Pacific cultures in general, like in Guam, for instance, as well, it is that the idea is that you're not trying to end this life and then, go on to somewhere else. A lot of times you stick around, and this earth is your heaven or your hell, because you want to be here for your descendants. And that's what you see with the Aumakua, where you can stay around and still be an active part of your descendants' lives. And so some of these stones are called walking stones because these pohaku, if you don't treat them right, revere them, and, include them in your life as like a family member, then they start moving secretly at night and sometimes wander away. And then other times there's rocks that have been in the way of developers that have caused a lot of issues for those developers because they just will not be moved. And, you're probably Jeremy, you're probably getting that spidey sense now where you're thinking, oh, isn't that like similar to Iceland and Ireland, where there's been like sacred trees, or in Iceland, sacred stones as well, where they actually decide to build the road shifted to the side so they don't have to move the sacred stone.
Right.
So Pohaku are something that, these Pohaku sites are all around the islands, and, many times they're hidden because they need to be, otherwise relic hunters will destroy and steal. But they're out there, or at least they were when Lahe was active in the early 90s. She was going around the islands, and elders told her where she could find these sacred sites. And she went around and took pictures of all these amazing sites, and sometimes had paranormal experiences associated with these sites. And she documented all of these stone structures all around the islands, and actually did have a big exhibit at the Bishop Museum. I believe it was 91, but it was early 90s when her work was exhibited. And I thankfully was able to find her unpublished manuscript, where I can see all those pictures of, different sacred stones, and hear all the stories that go along with those stones. And also, she includes pictures of the elders that told her the stories. It's a wonderful work.
Where do you get that?
Has all but been lost. Okay, so where do you get it? Well, you have to go to the Bishop Museum Library Archives, and they're only open at specific times. And if you look at World Cat, you'll find a listing, which I did. And then I went there. The Bishop Museum is in Honolulu, on Oahu, and so I went there, and they couldn't find it. So I was like, what? They're like, yeah, we have it, and we searched, our catalog, we show the same thing World Cat shows, but we don't have it. So I didn't let it go, and I kept bugging them about it, and they finally found it for me. And then, you have to pay for it, but it's worth it. And then I got this, 100-page manuscript. And so now I'm reading through it, and because I'm not supposed to, the Bishop Museum doesn't want you to just share their copy with everyone, but I am going through it so that I can glean stories from it, and, present those on the blog and in videos, so that information is not lost. And
do they have a plan to publish that? Like, why is that just sitting somewhere?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And why is it somewhere where when somebody comes seeking it, they lost it? Took a few weeks, even after I returned home, for them to find it and send it. But now I have it, and I'm not going to let it go into the dark.
Oh, wait a minute. So it's not like you go and sit in a library setting and then you can only read it there. They actually they mailed it to you?
No, they sent me a PDF.
Oh, okay, I see.
So you have to pay for them to copy the document and then send it to you. So yeah, like what I have done before is, I do this a lot, where I find a document that's not available, and then I go and then I take my phone and I take pictures of every single page. Jeremy, I'm devoted. When I could be on a beach somewhere, and I just sit in there and take a picture of every single page. And then now I just learned today, sorry to say, just learning today, how to make a PDF. on my own out of those images. So now that I've realized that, there's a lot more information that's going to be coming out on paranormalwomen.com in the next few weeks, because I've made some major technological advances.
Well, is this the kind of thing where you could
how to make a PDF?
Like, is this the type of thing where you could actually try to contact, well, I don't know if it's the museum or the original owner of this, and try to get it published for them?
Okay, yes. So I've already done that. I'm in contact with Lahe's friends and her widower. And her widower lives on the Big Island just like you, and said, hey, why don't you fly over and help me document all this stuff and make it public? So that's what we're in the process of doing.
Well, great.
So hopefully we'll be getting that going really soon. But yeah, that's the thing is what I'm doing is I'm looking for the women that did make a difference, but somehow history has forgotten, and trying to bring out, who they were, what they did, and the findings of their work, and presenting them to the public. And that's why I don't publish all the time, because I'm actively working on all these things, and sometimes I have to fly to various locations to actually get the information. Unfortunately, everything is not on the internet, and some librarians look at their role at more like gatekeepers than disseminators of information, which is a problem. But I'm able to get around that, and I don't. Yeah. I haven't got slapped around too.
Well, that's good.
By them, although they give me the librarian look sometimes. But they were very nice at the Bishop Museum, I have to say.
Oh, good. So that's interesting, because that is in a specific cultural construct, and so there's no question of what these things would mean to Hawaiians, I would think. Yes. But when we're talking about, say, a culturalist culture like America, and there's a haunted location or something, and do you have any cases or any women that you know of where the men were all looking at it, they didn't know what they were looking at, they had some sort of theory, and then a woman comes along and is like, no, actually, I think it's this. And then she ends up being right, or right, seemingly right enough that they steal that and they go with it. Is that something that happens?
Well, Catherine Crowe is the one that started it all for me. She was a 19th century Victorian mystery writer, and got interested in the paranormal because she spoke and wrote German and French. She was fluent. One of those rare researchers that can actually read in other languages and synthesize that material and bring it forth to her culture. So that's what she did. She was reading during a time in Germany. She was reading all these findings from doctors and physiologists and scientists who were encountering the paranormal while doing science, and not ignoring it, and writing very openly about it. And she was like, holy crap, what's going on, right? I mean, that's not what she said, because she's from England. But anyway, that's like my interpretation of her emotional response. And from that, she translated something called the Seerest of Prevorst, that was written by Justinus Kerner, who was a doctor and a poet, a real Renaissance man. And also he's the first scientist to isolate the botulism toxin and identify it. And then there were other ones too. There was another researcher she really liked who pioneered cataract surgery. So, I mean, these were real scientists, but yet they were also involved in the paranormal. So, so she did that translation of the Seeress of Prevorst in 1845. And then in 1848, she came out with her own book, The Night Side of Nature, in which she brings forth the concept of the poltergeist and the doppelganger, both words and concepts that came out of German parapsychological research. But she brought them into English language. You can look in the Oxford English Dictionary that lists the first time a word was ever used in English language, and you will find poltergeist in there, that it was first used by Catherine Crowe. So that's an example of everybody knows the word poltergeist, but they don't know the woman that brought it to them. So that's the problem. Huh. So, and going back to Lahaye for a moment, I have to return to her because I know maybe Pohaku research doesn't jump out as something paranormal to people, but the spirits of the people, she believed that the spirits of these ancestors were inside these sacred stones, and they would call to her in dreams. So of course, the elders that she spoke to helped her locate some sites, but other sites she was able to locate because a stone reached out to her in the dream world and told her where to find it. So there's a lot going on with Lahaye, and the other reason that we should remember her, and it's really startling that people don't, is because other than the more supernatural research that she did, or the more like supernatural archaeology, I guess you could say she did. She was also a human rights activist. And in 1999, she went down to Colombia with a peace organization that she had founded. And she wanted to help a tribe there that had been reaching out to humanitarian organizations and asking for help in dealing with the encroaching oil companies. So she went down there and wanted to help these people and started to set up an educational program for the families in that tribe. But then all of a sudden, she and two other activists disappeared, and they were found days later, just across the border from Colombia, shot dead in a farmer's field in Venezuela. And no one was ever brought to justice for that. That was 25 years ago this year. And I feel that's one of the reasons that I'm speaking out about her now, is because I'm like, wow, 25th anniversary. People usually make a big deal out of that. Why aren't people remembering Lahaye? So I feel, I don't know if it's a supernatural thing, but when I come across these stories, somehow I feel this pull towards them. Like I'm supposed to do something about it. And paranormalwomen.com is what I'm trying to do about it. And it takes time because it's a lot of reading. There's a lot of reading because there's a lot of writing that these women did. And, a lot of important findings that they were making that takes time to fully appreciate and bring into, today's parlance where, to make it available and interesting for people in today's audiences. So that's what I'm struggling to do with paranormalwomen.com.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned this part of it because I was just reading, I've been slowly reading Carl Jung's autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And it wasn't until he published, or, posthumously it was published, the Red Book, where it's like you get the sense of, oh, here's this famous, one of two of the groundbreaking famous psychologists in psychology. And, his method and all of his stuff came from, well, you could argue madness, or you could argue actual quote unquote paranormal spiritual shenanigans as recorded in the Red Book, these archetypes these visions sort of coming alive in him and him wrestling with them. But so I thought that this wasn't known until the Red Book came out, and that was part of why it was sort of being covered up all these years, because who wants that mixed in with their science? But as I'm reading Memories, Dreams, Reflections, I mean, I just read the chapter where it was, I think, the shortest case that he's ever had, or client who needed help, was a woman who came to him. He had a dream about her before she came in for a consultation. So before he ever met her or knew she was coming, he had a dream about her and knew what to do, knew what her problem was. And then this woman magically shows up, and he says to her the thing that stops her in her tracks. And then he has another dream about her that finishes off like, okay, this is the exact diagnosis. So he says it to her, and she's cured. She's fine. The end. So
wow,
how are we to pretend that didn't happen? Or like, how does that get buried or become sort of, I don't know, just some sort of story or metaphor for therapy? I don't know what, but it gets buried, right. The psychic component, the dream component even, and the, I don't know, the call to attention of the illusion of time, all at once happening in this. Like, how does that happen? Do you have a sense of that? Like, as you read researchers who fancy themselves scientific, or skeptics even, or maybe you've even encountered them, how do they compartmentalize these facts from these people who are undoubtedly significant in history and aren't cranks and quacks and so forth?
Well, these researchers, I think they know in their hearts that there's something else. It's not that they're against science. A lot of the people that I am researching, like Eleanor Sedgwick, for example, with the American Society for Psychical Research. Not American, sorry. The Society for Psychical Research. But, she did work, like everybody worked together across the pond, the American Society and the original Society for Psychical Research. But she was one of the founding members. And the thing that she did all the calculations, the stuff I can't even imagine. She did all the statistical work for the organization. So she was very science-minded. And, she got a lot of flack from spiritualists because when she noticed fraud, she would put the fraudster's feet to the fire and, reveal it. And she said that, I'm going to paraphrase now, I'm not so tough on this because I don't believe. This is basically what she was saying. I don't remember the exact quote, but if you want to read it, it's on paranormalwomen.com right now in my blog about her. But she was essentially saying, why am I so hard on this? Is it because I don't believe? No, it's because I do believe there are instances where this psychic stuff really happens. So we can't let fraudsters muddy the water. So that's essentially what she was saying. This is the reason I'm being so rigorous, because I want to study the real phenomena where something unknown is really happening. So, and I think that idea that, the supernatural is anti-science is something that's been foisted upon us. It's like this, sure, the Germans back in the 18th century and 19th century, they were, making these astounding discoveries in science and in the paranormal, and giving them both the same amount of respect and rigor. And I think that could go on today, but something has happened where people feel that the two can't coexist. And I don't agree with that at all. I think, the supernatural is just, something, or the unexplained is, they're just both things that, they may be perfectly natural. They might be perfectly explainable. We just can't do it yet. It's our problem. It's
here's
not
the thing I don't understand.
The problem of the phenomena. I'm sorry, go ahead.
There are certain things, like, say, a UFO sighting, a Bigfoot sighting, something like that, that are maybe rare and isolated to some degree, although you can have a mass sighting of UFO, I suppose. But even that has a beginning and an end. And then you can sort of have, it can go into the memory hole. We can have amnesia that ever happened, like with Gulf breeds.
Yeah, we got to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, hold on. This is my question. Like, why are we doing this? Because when you think about, like, what's the common denominator with all this stuff? Some of it happens all the time to people. I guess that's my point. Like precognitive dreams and feelings of, not deja vu. What's the other one? A synchronicity that leads you to something. I mean, these are common everyday occurrences for people. And when you think about, like, what is the common denominator? It is the psyche. It is psychology in some sense. Like, even compartmentalizing, like, how do you feel about this? Why are we saying the paranormal and we talk about ghosts, but when we talk about spirits, we're talking about spirituality? You're talking about dead people. And that's you.
Yeah, it's
that's
all the same.
You're talking about you and me dead.
Right.
Why do we pretend like that's not what we're talking about? We're talking about some monster called a ghost, or spirituality, which is either spirits or my own spiritual journey. I'm spiritual. Okay, but when you die, are you this monster ghost? Like, what's going on here? Why do we keep compartmentalizing these things? And then in the compartmentalization, we give a hierarchical value to certain ideas or senses of really ourself in a presumed afterlife. And then other things can be poo-pooed or, looked down upon. What do you think that is why are we doing that, Allison? Why are we doing that, Allison?
Well, I can't really answer, but I can give you my own answer, which is, we're throwing up all these artificial divisions. We're throwing up walls where really we should be tearing them down. And, that's what I mean. When someone takes, one of my tours in Hawaii and they're like, fire off a nasty review saying, where were the ghosts? And I'm like, it's all about ghosts. How could you even say that? It's because they are putting up that wall and they're not letting the concept of the Amakua come in. These are ancestors. They're dead. That's ghosts. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what form they come
also,
back in.
name for me another ghost tour you've been on where you saw a ghost. I mean, come on.
Oh, right. Definitely.
It's not baked into any ghost tour that you're going to see a ghost.
Right. I think there's just so many media influences that, people's expectations are out of whack because they grew up with Hollywood schlock and haunted houses and just, all this marginalization of the paranormal, and then they don't know how to integrate it back in their lives. And we need to integrate these things again. You talk to other cultures. For instance, I was a teacher at a Native American school for 13 years, and I would say that most of the kids, most of the adults were very much, westernized as you expect, but there was this whole undercurrent of spiritual belief, and a spiritual belief in a way where it's just normal that there's spirits, it just is. And it's not why, it just is, to quote Van Morrison. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, it was interesting working there because you saw through the students, you saw through these kids, like they're very westernized, because they're growing up watching maybe all these things on YouTube they shouldn't be watching. They're not going to my my YouTube channels, for instance. But anyway, and they're watching Hollywood horror movies and all this. But, you know, one of the things we did at the school is taught spirituality, taught this integration of spiritual beliefs. And it was a very much a part of their experience at the school, where, you know, like in spring, you know, here's something we do in spring. We reconsecrate the spirit pole and we dedicate it to the Thunderbird. And we ask the Thunderbird for protection from the coming storms. It was just normal. And that's like, if we talk about those things, you know, at first it's going to be shocking to some people to hear that, but after a while it'll become something that they get used to. And I have to speak to this. I was just talking to a neighbor about this, about how we tend to sublimate or bury these experiences when they happen to us, because there's so much stigma. There's so many negative emotions that are connected with not fitting in or appearing crazy. And so when something crazy happens to us, which is, you know, something unexplained or does not fit the, you know, 9 to 5, 24/7 paradigm, this algorithm that we're living in, instead of thinking for ourselves, we don't know what to do with it. And I do have a story from my own life. I have a couple of them, but, you know, one of them is not paranormal at all, but it's going to give you an idea of the psychology. So, one year, I had one of these, I don't know, baby showers, wedding showers, one of the things that women have to do that maybe they don't want to do, which I don't want to do. Anyway, I had to go to this family party, and then my husband was free to just gallivant around and take artsy architectural photos. So he went to this place in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin, which was a old drive-in movie theater. And the buildings were open, like the screen itself is a building. So he liked to go in there and like I said, take artsy shots of, you know, the building from the inside and stuff like that. So he's in there doing that, not, you know, just paying attention to the quality of his photos, not anything else. And then he walks out one of the doors and he sees all these men circled around this car, and these men are wearing long black hooded robes, and he's like, what is going on? And he just started backing away, and there's another door, a back door, thankfully, and so he was able to run out of there and get back to the car, because, you know, as he was watching, he noticed that there was weaponry among these cult-like figures. They had baseball bats and other implements of destruction, sledgehammers and whatnot, and started banging on this car, like in the center of the circle. And, you know, that's when he backed up and ran away. And then he came to get me from my banal, you know, baby shower. And he tells me this incredible story, which we forgot like a moment later, because it's a Sunday night and we both had work in the morning and we had to get dinner on the table. We had to do the laundry. There was a lot of things we had to do so we'd be ready for the 9 to 5 in the morning. And then we forgot about it for years and years and years, and we might have never remembered that extraordinary experience. And to tell you the truth, I mean, I was into the paranormal at that time. I was all about these, you know, getting a crack at trying to explain the unexplained. And I am ashamed to say that it totally went away. I didn't mean for it to go away. It was nothing that was shameful, although I think for some people, shame plays a role in this sublimation. But for me, it was just, I don't know. It just disappeared. And then years later, we're watching this movie late some weekend night, and it's a movie about another movie being made. And Scott's like, oh my God, my husband. Scott's like, oh my God, I was there. That's the scene. And it's a movie that got a lot of accolades. It was called American Movie, and it was about the filmmaking of Mark Borchardt, who's a Wisconsin local. And he was filming a witchcraft movie at that location. And Scott just wandered onto the set. That's what happened. So it was amazing to get that realization, but the psychology is more interesting of why did something extraordinary happen? And we're bored with the rest of this stuff, but we couldn't hold on to it. It's like when you have an amazing dream and you wake up and you're sure you're going to remember it and you want to remember it and you just can't remember it. What happened seemed to be similar to that.
All I can think is, oh yeah, I remember American Movie. I love that movie.
Great. Well, that's filmed right near where we live.
Well, we're kind of running up against the clock here, but I wanted to ask you one more question, I guess, on this
Sure.
stuff, which is, as I think about Hawaii in particular, live volcano, the island of Hawaii, live volcanoes,
yeah,
and a culture that knows how to live with them, work with them,
yeah,
has rituals and dances and the such that come from the earth to speak to the earth with the earth.
Yes. And
is that part of why this place is so alive in ways that we would call magical or paranormal or however it is, that even a lot of scientific types and skeptics and all that feel it and know it when they come here? Is the fact that we've killed off so many natural cultures around the world, really, but especially in America, it's easier to see, I guess, that those cultures that are a dialogue with Earth, that dialogue isn't taking place anymore. And to me, it's kind of like, maybe those rituals are doing something like acupressure. Maybe there's something that needs to happen that essentially what we consider to be paranormal hotspots or really alive with magic places, are those the places that there's still someone doing what they need to do, and then the rest of the land is sort of atrophied in some way? And is that why scientists, by and large, don't believe in magic and this sort of stuff? Because materialism, industry, science itself has, by and large, paved over not just the land, but also the cultures that work with the land to create the magic in the first place. Is that too large of a stretch, or is that
no? You ask big questions. That's what I love about you, and what I always loved about Paratopia back in the day is you don't shy away from the big questions. I would say, yeah, I certainly feel it in the Hawaiian Islands as well. And it may have to do with the earth, but it might also have to do with the power of belief. Perhaps, there's still so many people that actively believe in Hawaii, and that's what keeps it alive. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's why I created American Ghost Walks, not just so I could make money and be a professional weirdo writing and researching ghost stories. I mean, I love that part of it, but also because I think something's been lost, and I want to bring that back for every community that I can. There's magic there, and you just have to dig deep enough to find it. And I also want to tie in, what I was saying before too, about something that gives me hope is that experience that I had where I understood the psychology of burying something. I mean, I had my own experience with that, with the whole, cultist, that he thought he saw, my husband thought he saw that. I had that whole experience of having something extraordinary come into my life and then the next moment forgetting it forever. So to me, that means something good. That means that people are having paranormal experiences all the time. I would wager they are coming in contact with the numinous, but because they just don't have the tools to deal with it, they just don't know what to do and they forget. But I think it's out there and it's calling to us regularly, and we can find our way back to it because of that. And regarding Earth and the paranormal, I would recommend that you talk to my friend Jack Hunter in the UK. He wrote a book called Greening the Paranormal, Exploring the Ecology of Extraordinary Experience. And it talks all about the interrelation between the natural world and the supernatural and humanity.
Huh. Well, I'm going to have to definitely check that out.
Yes, I think you'd love it.
Excellent. Well, Allison, thank you for making your way to Paratopia. As I wind down doing these shows, I don't know that I'll actually make it to another Halloween special, but either way, let's do another Paratopia together. I got to pick your brain some more.
Oh, I would really love it. It's just fun to do. You should keep doing Paratopia forever.
Well, it feels like it's missing a little something without Jeff Ritzmann, but I appreciate it.
But perhaps his spirit is still with us.
For sure. And thank you for keeping the lights on female researchers and figures in the paranormal who no one's heard of, or very few have heard of.
And I'm not man-hating. I'm not trying to discount anything that these wonderful male researchers have done.
I don't even know why you have to couch it that way. Because there's some bunch of misogynistic a-hole listeners who are like, what? How dare you shine a light on women?
There might be. But my point is, you had a mother and a father. Let's have a mother and the father in everything, including the paranormal field. Let's make sure that they're equally represented. And that's all I'm asking for, is equal representation.
And the place to get that is paranormalwomen.com. So thank you for doing that. Because, you're doing the ghost walk stuff. Who's got the time? But you do. So thanks for doing it.
I'm working on it. I'm building more time into my schedule for it every day, and I promise more will be coming. And thank you again, Jeremy, for having me on. Mahalo nui loa.
And that's a wrap on the Halloween special. My thanks again to Mike Fiorito, to Allison Jornlin, and to all of you for sticking with the show, for keeping Jeff in your memories. And please go post these shows everywhere in social media. Go promote this. Get Jeff's thought out there. Keep him alive, at least as a beating heart in ufology. He is much needed, especially now, as you know, with this clamp down on a materialist, literal, aliens are here, military's got to do something about it perspective that has taken over or reasserted itself or been reasserted. I guess I shouldn't speak in the passive voice. Someone's reasserting this. Jeremy Corbell, looking at you. Military, looking at you. Yeah, David Grush, looking at you, kid. We haven't gotten disclosure, but we've sure gotten a bunch of new conferences and documentaries, huh? We've certainly gotten people's pockets fattened with wads of cash, so that's good. The wheels keep on turning, folks. And the only way out is through Paratopia.